the court. And we can teach young people the racial literacy skills, the same ones that we do for the barbershop. But the benefit is basketball becomes a vehicle in which you can make choices in ways that don't keep you out of the game. In the 5 years that we worked at a discipline school, we asked the security guards and police officers in the school not to intervene unless we got out of hand. And in 5 years, we never needed a police officer to help us. We wanted the conflicts on the court to be the way in which children learn to resolve them. So there might be a fight. There might be struggle before a fight, trash talking, but we wanted kids to work through it. And one way to do that was to have them practice the skills that we taught them and not leave the court and not be suspended. And we learned a lot about their ability to do that, and we filmed it as well. And so the book we call Playing with Anger is summarizes a lot of that work. And now we're training communities, rec centers, schools around the country through the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration that supports this to train communities in play how to use the skills and practice and run the programs, implement them in those cities around the country.
Now, when you've done your research, and you've done it now for a number of years, what is one of the things that you've talked about, some of the things that you've learned, but what are some of the things that you've learned that still to this day have shocked you, that you were either surprised about or that you were not expecting? Because, I know that researchers always have things that they expect when they go into research, and then there are things that they're like sitting there going like, I can't believe that happened.
Right. That's a great question. I think there were times, I'm trying to think about. I think probably one thing, it's not shocking now, but at the time when we were learning it, was that when boys and girls were receiving different kinds of racial socialization, when we asked girls and boys, that the girls were saying we're getting a lot more cultural pride reinforcement kind of socialization, and the boys were getting more what to watch out for, what to be concerned about and dangerous. Here's what you got to watch out for. And the goal was for all kids to get both positive, how you deal with your pride and culture and legacy, but also to prepare for battle or for struggle, and that the combination was the healthiest. But what we learned was that when the boys were getting messages about cultural pride, they tended to do worse in certain situations in school. And but when they got the messages around danger, they did better. And so when we looked at the data, we learned that really what was happening is that when the boys were getting the cultural pride stuff, it didn't match the environments that they were in. So they needed a message that matched the world they were in order to feel good about themselves. I think it meant that, now that you tell me that the world is rough, it's not fair, that makes sense to me, because then people have been treating me like I'm not a human being, and that socialization fit my worldview, and that means I can behave now knowing what's really going on. Don't lie to me. And when you don't lie to me, I know I do much better in that environment. So that was important. There are other surprises. I'm blanking on them right now.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, though, because one of the things that I've always found fascinating is that I consider myself, and this is on a religious versus a psychology thing, more of a spiritual person than a religious person. But in studying friends of mine that go to church, it seems to me that that's also kind of a dual message that we're sending our boys and girls in our churches, because we've talked about that on this show before with some like religious leaders, because I have a good friend of mine, Carl Kenny, who's been on this show. He was a reverend and everything, but it's like to some degree we teach our boys in the church environment to, go out there and basically shop around. The whole, Tina Turner and that kind of whole concept of shop around and, get with as many women as you can, date as many as you can, but at the same time, they're teaching the women almost the opposite of that, which is, try to be pure and driven snow and, wait for Prince Charming to sweep you off your feet and to take you down the aisle and y'all have 2.5 kids in the whole 9 yards and everything. But if we're teaching them almost things that are dichotomically opposed, then we wonder why when those relationships didn't happen among the teenagers, then you wind up having all these kind of like guilt things that are going on, which then they have to come to folks like you that are into the psychology field because they're sitting there getting these mixed messages and they don't know how to cope with it. So, they'll wind up having like an intimate moment and then feel guilty about it. And that even happens into the adult years. Because I think you've seen that with like church women that are, single and in their like, up in age, 30s, 40s, 50s, even probably in their 60s. They'll have some of these like guilty reactions based on what's happening within the romance, based on what they were being taught by their church elders and by their church leadership.
Yeah. And again, you're getting to those notions of boxes,
right?
Of how somebody should be. And then, in some church, the gospel has a lot of radical redefinition of both men and women religiously that we don't often bring up. It was challenging customs and narrow boxes of how to put God in narrow boxes, and regular people couldn't get access. And yet we'd still do that kind of thing today, even in our community, our religious community.
Yeah, and sometimes we're teaching them values that have to do with stuff that was written at an era where things that are going on now were not even being thought about at the time. There was no social media at the time that the Bible was being written.
Well, I bet that was a good show.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely interesting. Carl definitely brought some interesting points and things of that nature. So if folks want to get in touch with you to find out how they could learn some of these things on their own, or to learn more about some of the things that you have written and everything, what are some of the ways that they can reach out to see some of your written works that you have published on the scholarly site?
Yes. You can. We have a website, recastingrace.com. If people want to go and hear about us, that's usually the way to do it. And at the University of Pennsylvania, I have, there's several books, but there are links to a lot of the work that we have, recastingrace.com. And I think people will learn, will get a lot. And, the Racial Empowerment Collaborative is the name of the center that I run. And that's what people will get if they go to recastingrace.com.
And the Racial Empowerment Center, how many clients do you currently have, and how many folks are you currently helping through the Racial Empowerment Center? And exactly what does the center do? If you could give like just a little bit of more detail as to what the Racial Empowerment Center does and how folks can get involved with it.
Well, technically, we're interested in research and program development and community empowerment. So we bring in communities sometimes to think about how they want to problem solve issues related to neighborhoods. We're working with King Session Recreation Center in Southwest Philly, and that is that's important because many times there are folks working in communities, heroes and sheroes, that are literally not being heard or witnessed. And so we want to bring their stories out so that people will know how they're committed to young people. And they're saving lives, literally. We also, at the Collaborative, are a philanthropic organization. So we we've gotten a grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to try to improve the health of boys and young men of color around the country. And so what that means is we actually have funds that we've been giving out to communities across the country to deal with boys from very different walks of life and different communities of color, how to navigate the stress of difference, but using culturally responsive practices in the process. So they'll learn about that, and so we're both service a service center, and we're also a research group that tries to develop new knowledge. And we're philanthropic, so finding leaders of color, boys of color, communities of color that are trying their best to help boys of color and their families.
Who were some of the heroes and heroes that you have honored so far? You mentioned that you all have had some heroes and heroes. So I was just wondering if you could name some of them and some of their programs that are taking place either there or in other parts of the country that y'all have honored. And you don't have to name all of them, but you just want to like to highlight.
Yeah, there's a group, Arab American Family Center in New York City that's doing a phenomenal job. Some of the names, I can't remember everybody's name, but that's a place where the leadership is phenomenal. Tom Henry down in Southwest Philadelphia, working at the King Sussing Recreation Center, is a hero and has been fighting on behalf of families and fathers and young people for decades in Southwest Philadelphia. A young man from Nicholas Matthews at Nevada State University and in Las Vegas, who is part of the Gear Up program there in Las Vegas, is doing a phenomenal job for young people. Those are just a few of the folks that come to mind, and I know I'm missing out on others, but for sure. Mm-hmm.
What are some of the issues that some of the Arab Americans have been going through? You mentioned that there's an Arab American program, and I know that there's, with all the conflicts that's been going on in the world and with certain people in leadership trumping up against them and everything, I imagine that that's probably been a very difficult fight. I know that there was some stuff going on among some of the leaders in that community out of Detroit and other places like that. So I was just wondering what some of the things that you've learned from that community.
Well, I learned a lot about how they're doing work at so many different ends, from understanding for many Arab Americans what it's like to come to this country without speaking the language and keeping one's culture sacred, both religiously and culturally. The level of poverty that I don't think we understand for many of the folks in the communities, many of whom looking forward and working hard for citizenship, but also having to deal with the intense racial violence because you happen to be Arab American is unprecedented in my view. It's just invisible. There's obviously other communities that have been harassed, but I would just say that in visiting them and learning about their programs and the young people who carry a lot of the burden of family to try to keep language going and community and their families' understanding about American culture. This is true from a lot of groups that are immigrants, but I think given our country's hostility towards difference currently, we're learning a lot about, I've learned a lot about, for that community, what it's been because of the leaders at the Arab American Center in New York.
And have you done any work at all with any of the Dreamer community? Because I know that's another group that's definitely been fighting a lot. We've actually had some guests on the show before that have come from that community, and I know that they've been having a lot of fights. The Dreamers that came here, and in some cases this is their first generation being here, and in some cases they're the second or third generation, but they're definitely trying to stay here, a lot of the youth and everything. So I just wondered if you dealt with any of them.
Not directly, but the community group Make the Road New York has been doing a fantastic job, I think, about these issues. Stand out to me. I think we've learned a lot about a lot of community grassroots